afternoon, Rallies, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for our 8th session in our course series. And what a journey it has been. Throughout the series, we've discussed a number of topics ranging from financial well-being to vaccinate or not to vaccinate, mental wellness, burnout, and most recently, mindfulness and the importance of taking the time to breathe. The topics and speakers have been wonderful and have really helped us as Brollies who make up the core of the business overcome everyday challenges the new normal may present. While our well-being at work is very important, this series takes a holistic approach to well-being as we don't eat, sleep, and live at work, even though it might currently feel like it at times. There are many factors in our lives contributing to our well-being, ranging from experiences to people who matter in our personal lives. Children, whether your own, your nieces, your nephews, or even your friends or colleagues' children, are all facing the same new reality that we've all had to come to terms with. Today, we take a look at how the pandemic has affected children and how we as adults can help the children in our lives cope with what can be a period of heightened uncertainty and anxiety. Today's speaker is Francoise Harrison, an occupational therapist who obtained her BSc in occupational therapy from Wits University. Francoise has an interest in the field of sensory integration and has run a private pediatric therapy practice and has worked alongside NDT physiotherapist in Chartwell since 1991. She has over the years been involved in the training of therapists and teachers in sensory integration. She served for 9 years on the board for the South African Institute for Sensory Integration and has also lectured and ran treatment courses for occupational therapists and served as a protocol marker for the South African Institute for Sensory Integration. Lots of tongue twisters there. Francoise is passionate about sharing knowledge and networking in the field of child development. She also has a keen interest in diet and lifestyle issues, including epigenetic factors and the role in which they play in learning difficulties. She's attended many courses on complementary therapies and has completed several courses in craniosacral therapy with the Upledger Institute. She works mainly with babies and preschoolers, but sees children of all ages. Welcome, Francoise, and thank you so much for being with us today. We look forward to getting some insights on the topic that perhaps we don't speak about, and that's the challenges that children face. Over to you.
Hello. Thank you so much, Andile. That's a lovely warm welcome. Hello, everybody. Hi. Thank you all for being here. I hope that we can share some interesting knowledge and hopefully empower you with things that can assist you in managing and assisting your own children and the children around you. I think children affect all aspects of our lives, whether we have them or not. So this COVID-19 pandemic has brought many gifts, it's brought many challenges, but it's also brought us many gifts. It's forced us to stop. It's forced us to review our lives and it's reminded us to value our loved ones and the things around us. It's taught us to be grateful. I think our sense of gratitude has grown significantly as we've had to stop and think and review what we do. It's reminded us to cherish our loved ones and to cherish the things that are special to us and to relook our values. When the world stopped during the hard lockdown for many countries at the start of this pandemic, there were parts of the world where nature began to increase its biodiversity and nature began to heal the world. And I do think that that's something we can't afford to forget, and we have to continue in improving the planet that we live on. We're part of an ecosystem and we cannot disconnect from this ecosystem without harming ourselves. And I do think that's something we need to be mindful of. So I don't need to remind you about, or anyone, about the obvious difficult challenges that the pandemic has brought us, the loss of jobs and financial security, food insecurity for some, illness, loss of life, a loss of a way of life. There's so many losses that this pandemic has brought. Also being separated, having to be separated from loved ones and not being able to say goodbye to loved ones as they've faced their death. I think that's been incredibly difficult for many people. And as adults, we're faced with so many burdens as a result of these things. We're also faced with the gifts. For children, many children have been affected in different ways. And I think those children who live in suburbia, in cities, suburban communities with access to good schools and to good internet and data, and have managed a whole lot better than those children who are in rural areas. And I think we often think that those children in rural areas will have access to data and perhaps to a WhatsApp-enabled phone. But it's a huge obstacle to try and do online learning on a very simple little phone that doesn't have good resolution, doesn't have good data, and isn't able to live stream so much of the information that's been available to city counterparts. So children in rural areas, I think, have been affected very differently. I'm not going to focus on those children today, as much as I feel we really need to be very aware of how this impacts all of us. Those children are seriously at risk with enormous dropout rates and really huge hardship. And what it holds for the future is actually incredibly concerning. So what we're going to be looking at today is to look at children in cities and suburbs and children in our own milieu, which I guess most of you are part of. You're probably not out in rural areas. Okay. I like to empower parents and people generally with information that assists them. I certainly know for me how understanding how things work makes it so much easier for me to figure how I'm going to help solve the problem. So I'm not going to give you a 10-point checklist on what you can do to settle your children and make them happier, or make yourselves happier in dealing with them, or perhaps your neighbor's children in dealing with them. My aim rather will be to give you information which I think is valuable to all of us. But in this case, we're going to look at specifically how it affects our children. So you'll bear with me if I just digress for a moment to a very important topic. I want to look at how children begin to learn and how they prepare for life and how they begin to develop both socially and emotionally. This is a really important step. Our earliest learning takes place in utero. So babies are incredibly capable when they're born. They've already learned a lot about the world around them in utero. So a lot of their learning happens both in utero and then during and shortly after their birth. So for a baby whose mom is healthy, who feels safe, and who feels supported in her immediate circle of family and friends, that start is a whole lot better than for the baby who is born or is carried by a mom who's feeling really stressed and doesn't have the support network that she ought to have as she's pregnant. Those babies who are born into a good, enveloping, cozy situation where moms are supported and feel good, and nudge, nudge, wink, wink, month of the women, okay? These babies feel felt. Their mothers are relaxed and they're able to read their cues when these babies arrive, and they're empowered by this warm circle of support. So for many of our mums, that hasn't applied during this time, and it's been a really long period, I don't have to tell you. So attachment and bonding can begin in such a situation. So the sense of being safe and being part of a broader supportive community is vital for babies and moms to develop that attachment and bonding, and for babies to develop a sound emotional development and a sense of physical well-being. So when parents have connected and attuned to their babies, brand new babies who are born to a mom who can actually take the time to move into what we'll call that calm peacekeeping mode, which I'll discuss with you just now, those babies manage a whole lot better. And we have a huge number of little babies that have come into the world in a very, very difficult situation with this COVID pandemic. Lots of moms who've been totally stressed during their pregnancies, who've gone into labor or given birth, however the baby has come into the world, in a situation where they're separated from loved ones. Everyone around them has been wearing strange masks and look like Michelin men. It's really quite scary. You can't see anybody, you can't read their cues, you don't see facial expressions. It's really quite freaky. So we know that birth is a time when when moms need to feel that connection and to feel safe. So our support to moms at this time is particularly important as we build our future generations. So when things go awry, that bond that I've spoken about, that attachment bond, will also need to be mended. There's a certain amount of there's a certain amount of neurological connection that occurs and physiological connection that occurs between moms and babies. And part of what has happened during this lockdown with many children is that we've had a bit of a disconnect sometimes, emotionally disconnected from children because of the stresses involved. So I'd like for us to take a look at how humans have been designed to protect themselves and each other through this amazing autonomic nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system is that part of your nervous system that just chugs on along in the background. It readies itself to prepare you to fight, flee, or defend yourself in a difficult situation where your survival is at stake. And equally, it allows you to calm and protect yourself and to sleep at other times. So let's take a look at the survival aspect of the nervous system. In just a split second, if you find yourself in a situation where perhaps there's a car coming straight at you and you need to jump back and step back onto a pavement to ensure your safety, you'll immediately do so in a split second without even stopping to consider what you've done. In that split second, your heart rate will increase, the blood will rush into your limbs and be ready to fight, flee, or defend yourself. All you had to do was jump out of the way of an oncoming car. But this nervous system predominates whenever we find ourselves in a survival kind of situation. So we're mammals. We have to remember we're mammals. Mammals protect themselves from predators, and predators can be seen in all shapes and forms. Sometimes it's just about how our minds experience different predators. The predator could be your boss in the office. Maybe I shouldn't say that today, but certainly we do feel under stress at different times. And what happens when we're under stress and the survival nervous system or sympathetic nervous system predominates is really important. So one of the first things to happen is that our heart rate goes up, our breathing rate goes up, blood pressure rises just a little, the blood rushes into your limbs, ready to run, to defend yourself, to be physically active, but it also, in doing so, moves out of your gut. The blood moving out of your gut means that you no longer have a gut that is digesting. You know that feeling when perhaps you've had a near accident in a motor vehicle and you suddenly find that for the rest of the day, that hamburger you ate just sits there. It just doesn't digest. That's part of the effect of the survival nervous system, where you've just no digestive juices. That peristaltic movement that moves the food through your gut stops, and you really feel quite nauseous. You also don't feel like eating. Remember that, because a lot of the situations we see in children who are stressed, babies who are stressed, babies will develop colic. They'll develop acid reflux. Adults do that too. We reach for the antacid tablets and we look for things that help us digest our foods, when actually we should be looking at how our nervous systems are coping and whether we're perhaps just in chronic flight or fright mode. Okay. At the other end of the continuum, you've got the calm, peacekeeping nervous system. This nervous system predominates when we sleep, particularly if we're sleeping well, and when we get rest and digest. It's the nervous system that allows the blood to move back into the gut and to all the vital organs, and it's restorative and regenerative in nature. We need a certain amount of that nervous system function to predominate every day in order just to keep functioning and to be in a good space. Somewhere in the middle, we have focused attention, being able to be mindful, being able to connect with individuals, forming relationships, being able to be cautious about what's going on around us, but also calm enough not to overreact, not to become totally stressed. The function of that calm and peacekeeping nervous system and the survival nervous system is integral to our own survival, and we need a balance of both those aspects of the nervous system. I think this is a really important aspect for me, and it's part of what we need to understand when we're looking at trying to assist our children in coping with the stresses they experience. So for ourselves, what we would do when we're feeling really stressed is perhaps to go out for a really physical run, something that keeps us busy for a while, gets our heart rates up, and allows us to expend that unnecessary nervous energy in a more practical way. For our children, the same applies, but we can also hold the situation for them so that we encourage more of the calm, peacekeeping nervous system's effects. This amazing nervous system, once it's in survival mode, is also likely to make us very twitchy and uncomfortable with certain kinds of sensory input that would normally not bother us when we're a lot more relaxed. So our concentration and focus goes. When we're chronically stressed, our concentration and focus goes. And we find it hard to focus on the really important detail. We're bothered by all the other things going on around us. Our senses become heightened. For young children, they respond a whole lot more to loud, shrieky noises, particularly the high-pitched sounds. Now remember, we're mammals. Mammals signal their distress with high-pitched sounds, and so do children. And often we want to just tune that out and try and silence our children, but we don't realize that this is part of what they're doing in an effort to get our attention and to help to give us cues that they need some assistance in regrouping and rebooting. Otherwise, we know where it all ends up, and we move into a tantrum or a great big fight, depending on the child's age. Okay. So it's important to remember that our physiology changes completely depending on where we are on that autonomic nervous system continuum, whether we're in this calm, peaceful end or in the fight or flight overreactive state. And on many occasions, we can actually remain in a chronic state of sympathetic nervous system activity. And it's really hard to manage our lives and our children's lives when that's where they're at. So just to look then at how babies and children have coped with a lot of the situations during the pandemic. If you look at 17 or 18 months and how long that is in our lives, we can all think back quite easily to situations in 2019 where we were having fun, where life was fairly normal and things were progressing well. For babies, this is their entire life. And babies need situations in which to learn. Young children are still developing and learning about how the world works. They learn social skills, and they learn their emotional development takes place during childhood, during infancy. They learn things like who to hug and who not to hug, which situations are safe and which situations are not safe. And this is really scary when you think of how we have had to socialize our children into believing and understanding, for important and good reasons, that they need to keep their distance from other people, that it's not okay to hug, that actually if you hug granny, you could make her ill. Fortunately now, hopefully as more people have had the virus and as more people are becoming vaccinated, that becomes a whole lot easier, and it's an easier situation to navigate. But it's certainly impressed on our children the fact that all is not safe. Children need to feel safe in order for us to manage that autonomic nervous system for ourselves and for our children. Feeling safe and being safe is one of the first things that we need to consider. Children take their guidance from us and from the circle of significant adults around them as to what is safe and what is not safe. So let's look at how working from home has impacted on this situation, particularly with younger children. It's been really, really difficult. And I'm sure those of you with younger children will know that it's incredibly difficult balancing the act of being present, being physically present at home, and yet being unavailable. That situation is toxic to little children, particularly to babies. They expect parents to be on hand and available right there and then. And unfortunately, we've ended up using all sorts of other distractions to keep children busy, from screens and phones and funny games, and we give in to all sorts of things we would normally not do, just simply because we need our children entertained and out of the way. This has not been a healthy way for children to grow up. I don't need to tell you that, you know that. Toddlers have need to understand social distancing and things to be avoided, and family gatherings have become limited. Children don't know their grandparents well, and vice versa. That's a really, really sad fact that it's become so awkward. And yes, I do understand that you want to connect on FaceTime and on WhatsApp and other social media. And yes, those are important connections. I'm referring to the videos that are not so. We'll look at that in more detail just now. So for primary school children, online learning has made it very hard to teach children. I think parents have been teachers have been equally challenged in trying to make learning accessible and trying to make it fun and upskilling themselves to being able to use all the media available all at the same time. It's been a really hard journey. Okay, children have a very short attention span for online learning. They are not designed to learn in that way. Children are designed to learn through movement and through their senses. They're designed to learn by experiencing things through their own bodies. They don't learn by being told things. And that old-fashioned didactic approach where you would teach a child by rote, some of us have had to go back to that during this time. It's really scary. Children need the experiences in order to learn. And for some children, I think it's actually been better just to remove them from those learning situations, which actually are quite toxic to them. And maybe just to accept there will be an extra year that they will have to put into their learning schedule in order to catch up. Children are at all different levels right now. It's really extremely concerning. And I'm not sure that education's facilities and departments have actually got a good plan in place to make up for this. I'm not sure what the plan should be. It's really big. Yeah? Okay. So young children who've lived through this pandemic, especially younger children, have a deficit of movement experiences. And we need to look at how children learn to do new tasks, particularly obviously the unfamiliar and unlearned things. So just in order to highlight this with an experience for yourselves, remember back to how you felt or what you did when you learned to ride a bicycle. Did you look through all the YouTube channels to find a suitable one that showed how bicycles should be, how to learn to ride a bicycle? Heck no. Okay. Similarly, we can't teach our children through online situations. When you learned to ride a bicycle, you had to figure, just by looking at the bicycle and perhaps by watching some of your older friends riding or watching brothers and sisters, you had to figure where to put your butt, where to hold the handlebars, how to balance yourself, where the pedals go, which feet go on the pedals. As you get going, you need to figure which foot needs to push down in order to actually propel the bike forward, and all at the same time to steer in the right direction so you don't have a major accident. So the same goes for children learning new tasks. They need to actually experience these things for themselves, and they need to experience them in a way where they can anticipate, organize and sequence their movements in a synchronized way so as to achieve success. And they can only do this by trying it out for themselves. And I do think with online learning, we seem to feel that we can give children a recipe that says, this is how you do it. We can't teach children in that way. That motor planning, that working out how to actually perform new and unfamiliar tasks in a successful way only comes through trial and error and building step by step on the motor patterns and skills that you had before, so that you've already learned. So for young children in particular, it's really, really important that they learn through their bodies. Now, one of the things I've seen that's really impressed upon me is how many people have had to rely on outsiders to assist them in taking care of their children. And generally, the carer is not a family member, it's someone in their own, someone who's come into their own home and is there while parents are working. And that carer's job is to keep children happy and to keep them out of mischief, and more importantly, keep them quiet. They can't be too noisy because mom's on a meeting online and dad is on an important phone call. So children have been stifled in what they've been able to do. And often they've been allowed to get up to an awful lot of mischief, and boundaries haven't been put in place. And the carer or auntie is really just doing the very best. She's trying to keep her job secure, and she's trying to make sure she keeps the children out of mischief. but this is also not conducive to learning. So going forward, it's really important that carers are also empowered to know that it's okay if children fall. It's okay if they get dirty. Yes, there will be mishaps, but that's how children learn. We can't protect them from all of these things. And it's not about keeping the children perfectly behaved, because that's not how it works. Okay? I think that's an important one. I've seen so many children just literally in the last year whose ability to acquire new skills has been seriously hampered by being really still. So let's just take a quick look at the impact of television and screen media. And I think this is really important. If one looks particularly again at younger children and watching what happens with TV and screens, they're looking at a two-dimensional image which is portraying a three-dimensional image. There's a good start to scramble your brain ready, okay? Babies, children under the age of 2 should not be exposed to screens of any sort, except for FaceTime with granny. I'm a granny. Yeah, for connecting with family, okay? That's important. But they shouldn't be exposed to movies and videos and ongoing stuff on screens. It's really, really unhealthy. More importantly, what it does is it impacts their dopamine reward system. So if you look at a lot of the cartoons that are produced for young children, they have short, sharp edits, lots of quick flashes on the screen, lots of sudden sounds, okay? And those grab a child's attention and then allow for or result in a short burst of dopamine. So dopamine is our feel-good neurotransmitter. It's the neurotransmitter that just oozes into your bloodstream when someone says, oh, wow, don't you look good? Oh, well done, okay? That kind of praise elicits a little burst of dopamine, but so too do the little edits and change of attention in videos. And children's dopamine reward system becomes seriously hampered. Their concentration actually becomes poorer, of poorer quality and poorer duration for long-term watching of videos and movies and such. It's not doing our children any harm. There's no research to show, other than perhaps a little for Sesame Street years ago, that videos actually empower our children in learning more language. They're visual. There's not much language that they learn. And if they do learn language, it's how to speak in a twang or how to learn new words, but not in a conversational, meaningful, useful way. So yeah, avoid screen media as hard as you can go. For our teens, it's really been such a difficult time. Teens define themselves through their social relationships. And this has been a dreadful time in which we all know how awful social media is in terms of how many likes did you get and who's following you and who's checked out your profile and who checked out your Instagram page. For teens, this is the way that they've begun to define themselves, and that's really scary. It's really been a difficult time. And for those teens who not been part of all the usual experiences that they would go through in high school, and particularly nearing the end of a high school career, where they become part of the senior team, part of the debating team, you name it. They've missed out on so many of those opportunities. And yes, there've been online opportunities, but there's no way they match up with the real thing of actually connecting physically. So I think for probably the group that are most disadvantaged in this whole pandemic in terms of mental health are our teens. And I do think we've got an awful lot of work to do in offering them opportunities for connecting, for forming relationships, particularly for understanding as well about cyberbullying and about the ills and issues of social media, that they cannot define themselves through their contacts on social media. Really, really important. So what do we value and what do our children see that we value? I think that's one of the things we can start to consider in figuring how to improve on our current situation. Just to look at what do you value and what do your children think you value. Those values will be taught to your children by your actions, okay? The things that we can do, we can look at the kinds of things that help facilitate that calm, peacekeeping nervous system that promotes good sleep, good digestion, that allows you to regroup and be ready for another day and not to stay in that stressed out, panic state that sometimes does prevail at times like this. So attuning with your child, connecting in real time, making opportunities to actually spend time together, And I find all too often parents are doing things with their children that their children like doing. And I'm not saying that's wrong, it's wonderful, but you want to also be sure that you enjoy the tasks you're involving your children in. It's about both of you. It's not just about the child enjoying the task. And if you enjoy it, you'll invest yourself a whole lot more in the task. Okay, so doing things that you both enjoy. And for those children, for those of you adults around here who don't have children, where you can, to invest in other children who are around you, children who perhaps haven't had the advantages of perhaps being able to learn new skills or engage in new experiences, and to support those parents whose lives are complicated by having children. Let's also take a look at how we can recruit the peacekeeping nervous system through breath work. And I know that you've done a workshop on that, so that's absolutely wonderful. I won't go into an awful lot of detail on this, but certainly breath work where one extends the breath and as much as possible is really helpful. Activities like going for a long walk, taking a run, doing something really, really physical, working up a heart rate, really important for rebooting that autonomic nervous system. Listening to good music, not just classical music, not just organizing music, any music that you enjoy. But very often for babies and children, you want to look for music that has a beat of 70 or 70 beats or lower. 72 or thereabouts is your heartbeat rate, and something lower than that is very much more organizing for children than a boom, 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 boom kind of beat. Okay, blowing bubbles, getting regular exercises, and making learning fun. Get out there and have fun, have with your children, have fun with your children, allow them to feel felt. For those who have toddlers, to remember that a toddler showing some absolutely diabolical behavior is really just pulling together the best that he or she can to try and get your attention to make things change. They're not doing something deliberately to put you out. And similarly for our teens, it's all well-intentioned. They can be manipulative, but stop, discuss, talk about it, make time to connect. That bond that we form with babies just after birth and through the first couple of months is as important throughout childhood as it is right at birth. And it's really, really important to nurture those bonds, to let our children feel felt, to feel understood, and to connect with them in whatever way they understand as being a good connection. So yep, I'll leave you with that. Okay. Thank you, Andile.
Thank you, Francoise. Sure, there was definitely food for thought. Please, can I encourage anyone who's got questions or comments to send them through in the question and answer section. I would like to start with the question from my side. I know that I speak for everyone when I say that I struggled with homeschooling last year. I mean, it was coping with COVID, working from home at the height of lockdown, and then just homeschooling it just blew my mind. I didn't think that I would be struggling with grade 1 so much, and so much so that my son, who's 7, had to repeat grade 1 because I honestly just didn't cope. So how does one cope with a child who's just struggling with school and just didn't adjust to our parental teaching? Because we're certainly not teachers. We might be good at our daily jobs at Brawl and being great at what we do on our day-to-day jobs, but we're certainly not teachers.
Yeah. So I deliberately left that out, didn't I? Hey, I'm convinced that particularly for younger children, homeschooling is just such a challenge. There are very few children who actually cope easily with homeschooling. For most children, it is exactly as you've described. And I'm wondering whether for younger children, whether we wouldn't do better to be teaching our children sharing other experiences and teaching them about how the world works. So I look to some of the people who deliberately homeschool. Okay, so those people who designed their lives around that. And yes, I'm not suggesting that works for employees at Brawl because you need to work. You haven't dedicated your lives to finding a big chunk of your day for homeschooling. But if you look at proper homeschooling involves lots of field trips, lots of outings, lots of experiential work. And I actually think that for teachers to create a situation where they're teaching online is incredibly difficult, and for children to grasp that is incredibly difficult. My tendency is to go with the fact that, yes, we do need to homeschool, lessons have to be online, but to trim out what one can as you can, select the important stuff, have conversations with the teachers, let them know that we are really not superhumans. We don't do this well. We're not meant to function this way. I would sooner that parents, and I know it's easier now because homeschooling is not part of what we're doing. Children are back in school, thank goodness. But if there should be a situation where we return to this, to see whether we can connect with teachers and explain that this doesn't work for us. I'm sure I'm the rebel here. Hey, I don't think this is what.
No, I think it's a wonderful answer. And I've got another question for you, Francoise, and it's has to do with screen time, which is something that you spoke about earlier. Yeah. And it's two leading questions. That's from the same person, and they're asking, what is the maximum screen time a child should be exposed to daily? Because we know that it's all well and good to listen, that we shouldn't be exposing our children to screen time. Whether we can realistically do so is another story. Okay. And then what's the best way to cut screen time for a 5-year-old? So they've given us the age of the child.
I've given you the age. That's great. Okay. So I'm going to answer that in a different way. I'm going to say, what is that child not doing while he's watching the screen? What is he not doing? He's not running outside. He's not playing in a sandpit. He's not climbing trees. He's not exercising his body. He sure as hell is not exercising his eyes. He's not looking near and far and near and far. His eyes are right there, glued at a certain distance from the screen. He's not picking up on a whole lot of new information, although my grandson would tell me otherwise, that actually there's a load of information on YouTube and that somebody has put a net nanny or something on there and he doesn't watch naughty stuff. I don't know that there is a straight answer for that. I do think that we live in exceptional times, and I don't think it's fair for anybody to say ban screen time. What I can tell you is that my experience has been that for those children where we can see, in whom we can see that screen time has really affected them adversely, we really need to put in some drastic measures. And that may involve bringing in an au pair. It may involve getting granny to come and live with us for a couple of months. It may involve a complete change in what we do, because for growing brains, that can completely disrupt what's going on. A lot of the videos that they have for children are actually quite aggressive. They encourage a certain amount of aggression, but they also scramble the brain. They really don't do a growing brain any good. So I would try to stick with the kinds of videos, I'm trying to remember the name, ducks on a pond, swans on a lake, oh, what is his name? The environmentalist kind of movies.
Right.
Okay? So something slow and steady that unfolds a story and tells something new. My tone of voice is already telling you the kind of program I'm thinking of. Okay.
So that type of pace.
Yeah, not the what we call skopsketendonner.
Right.
We really want to try and discourage children from being too involved in the kind of mindless videos. So I don't know that I've answered that question.
You have quite well.
An hour a day max, maybe more on weekends, but it's also about what they're watching, what they're doing. Okay.
We've got another question here. Let me just quickly go to our chat session. Whilst we're waiting, there's a question here that says, how can I help my anxious child, and what signs must I check for if my child has anxiety?
Okay, so we are seeing so many more anxious children in our therapy situations. And I think that the anxiety comes about probably from a child who has been told so much or heard so much about how dangerous this COVID virus is and the harmful things that can happen. We've seen a number of children who have become really quite quite fussy about who they'll touch, what they'll touch, about things being washed. They'll come into our sessions and ask whether we've sanitized and what have we cleaned. And sadly, it's part of what we do. One of the things we can do to assist children is to give them the facts. So you don't want to overdo this, but you also cannot say to children that somebody who's very ill will be okay. It's unfair. You know, we can let them know that we can reassure them and let them know that the doctors are really good doctors and they're doing a good job. And so keep it reality based and let them know how well things are going. All those suggestions I made for facilitating that calm, peacekeeping nervous system can be really helpful. So heavy exercise, massage. You know how children sometimes enjoy having their backs rubbed or having their feet rubbed, or just a calm, soothing cuddle.
More of that.
Yeah, so oxytocin is the fall in love hormone, but it's also that hormone that occurs when we hug each other, when we pet the dog, when we rough and tumble in a fun way. And certainly one can try and facilitate a lot of that through our bodies, doing a lot of hugging, exposing children or allowing children to play with lots of soft, cuddly toys. Just doing the soft, sensitive, cuddly stuff can be really, really reassuring for children who are very anxious.
On that soft and cuddly stuff, Francoise, I think one of the things that parents are probably struggling with working from home and possibly hybrid ways of working is that we spend most of the time on calls and we're shushing the kids, and so we've got this dual personality where our kids are suddenly meeting work mom with a work voice, and there's suddenly a split personality that they've never seen before. What confusion, if any, is this causing for the child? Because I certainly have a different persona to soft and cuddly mom that would possibly be coming home in the afternoons, whereas more often than not, I'm telling them to shush and to go away and close the door, and mom's working right now.
Yeah, okay. So making things predictable is one of the most useful things we can do in that kind of situation. Also for the anxious child, where the child knows what's coming next. If you can, see if you can prepare a little box of tricks, something the child can do, an activity, something a little unfamiliar, unknown perhaps. And I'm not suggesting you go shopping, but maybe that would help, just to have a few extra little toys and novel things that you've put aside. And that when mommy is going to be in her meeting, here's your box of things, here's a little surprise, you can open this. But also to possibly put together a schedule on the fridge. So you use all your fridge magnets, and with the child, create little post-it kind of notes where at this time mommy's in a meeting, there's going to be so many meetings, but when that big hand on the clock gets back up to there, and I'll come and tell you when it's there, don't come and ask me, when the clock gets back to that spot, then you and I are going to go for a walk, or we're going to bake muffins, or you can help me cook supper, or whatever it is that can happen next. So to have things for the child to anticipate and look forward to, it's quite a tricky one to put provisos in place. If you behave yourself nicely, we'll go for a walk. If you're really very, very good, then I'll give you a hug.
Of course, of course.
Okay. That was a silly example, but it illustrates the point that we need to be available for our children, regardless of whether
what the situation is.
Absolutely. We totally love them just because they breathe. And they need to know that, but they also need to know that this is what daddy's doing. Daddy needs to earn money, and this is how daddy earns money. And when we're done, we're going to be able to do whatever it is. So to put together a schedule on the, which I think is really helpful, and to see if you can create a little roster, or not roster, a schedule of activities that the child can be involved in. Being very careful again, not to make it so structured that it's do this, do this in this way.
Stops being fun.
You want exploration. You want good, messy, healthy fun where you can have it. Does that answer your question?
It does. It answers it really well. And I think it answers it for the little ones, but for those parents and those uncles and aunts that are out there that have older children that are preteen or teenagers that are maybe more conscious of the effects of COVID and the death and the grief and and the emotional side of it. And teenagers are said to be petulant by nature anyway. How are they supposed to be dealing with this difficult time of we're locked in, we're in the house, we possibly several generations that are living under the same roof, and now we're working at home, and some schools are still doing partial learning where you can go to school for a certain number of days and not every day. So there's this cohabiting more than we ordinarily would be. And plus living with the petulant teenager, how are we supposed to be dealing with all of those dynamics and raising these teenagers in the right way?
Really hard one. I think the first thing is to listen, to be available, to listen, to let them know that you are interested in how their day went, but without interrogating. We always seem to sit our teenagers down and say, well, I've got some time now, tell me about it. And that's not how teens function. Teens want to tell you about it when they want to tell you about it. But I do think to have an open and listening ear, to avoid doing too much of the correcting. I know it's really tricky, but I think very often we want to use opportunities we have with our teens to be able to tell them how we think they should be behaving, what they should be doing, how they should be connecting with us, and what was wrong and what wasn't. So avoid those kind of conversations where you can. I think a couple of golden rules with all children, but particularly with teens, it's about, is their behavior respectful? Is it respectful towards themselves, towards others, and towards property? If they cover those three, it doesn't really matter what they do. It doesn't really matter if they're behaving really differently, and grandma would be disappointed if she saw them, because that's not about, it's respectful, it's still okay. Yeah. So it's about teaching children and talking to them so that they understand that all you're looking for is a level of respect, but also, so in terms of discipline, but in terms of them feeling comfortable to actually come and talk to you and tell you what they're experiencing. And that probably won't happen over the dinner table. That will happen when you're out playing a sport together, when you're out.
Is that the time to raise issues such as mortality, because we are dealing with that during COVID? I mean, is that the right time, or is there no right time for such?
I know that there's a right time. I think the right time is when the question comes up, Andile. I also think that we need to explain and that life is unpredictable. Nothing is a given. And I do think that for many of our children, we so want this gorgeous, rosy future for them. Even before COVID, there's a sense of wanting to have life perfect. Every day you'll have a friend. Every day we'll do something new and wonderful. You'll always have a birthday party. You'll always have everything I can provide you. And life isn't like that. I think that's one of the things that this pandemic has taught us. One of the most useful things I think that we can do for any of us, and our teens especially, when life when we face life with a whole lot of uncertainty and horrible things, is to really just stop and take stock and see what we're grateful for. What are we actually grateful for? What works? What can we applaud in our lives? What can we celebrate? And that's a good place to begin. And for teens, that's not where they're at. Teens often find themselves in that, where I was describing that survival nervous system. So the glass is half full. There's never enough. It's not okay. And sometimes simply when we describe our own situation, where we're not griping about who moaned at who from the office and how awful it is, we've got another jolly online, and just simply for us to show them through our modeling how we manage difficult situations, that it's not all bad, that we can face life sunny side up with the cup full, not half empty.
That's enough. One last question, Francoise. Yeah. How do we reintroduce children back into the world after the pandemic?
Oh, with big hugs. Yeah, I do think that as humans, we connect through touch. One of our most important senses is the sense of touch. And I do think it's the one thing that for me has really been lacking, is that children will come and they'll elbow me hello, or they'll fist bump me hello. And I do think that as we begin to just feel more confident in our ability not to be spreading the virus. And I do think that that is going to happen going forward. I know that they're predicting a fourth wave. I'm hoping that the fourth
Goodness,
wave,
holding fingers that there won't be.
so the fourth wave is coming. But if one listens to the science and what's behind it out there, the fourth wave should be a whole lot less in terms of the severity of the illness, provided that we can step up on vaccinations and get everyone on board. The fourth wave should be a little like it is in the UK. And I find that totally heartening. If you do want to just feel high-spirited about what the future holds, just tune in to any sports channel or whatever that's showing you what's going on.
Absolutely uplifting, that's true.
Their numbers are up, but they are reconnecting and they're out in the world. So your question to me was, how do we get our children back out there? I think our first should be to prioritize sports and outdoor activities. And it's awesome that we're going into spring. It's just the right time of the year to be doing
Indeed.
And to focus on outdoor activity, physical sports, using our bodies, experiencing life as we were meant to. Because I do think this indoor stuff and sitting behind a screen is such a bad idea. Yeah.
Well, speaking of screen time, I think we should definitely close this session. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon, Francoise. It's been absolutely lovely. I know that I'm personally grateful for all the knowledge you've shared with us. So I'd like to extend a big, broad thank you to you for affording us your time this afternoon and empowering us to assist our children. And I'd really just like to give everyone a reminder that our next session of the course series will be next week, Tuesday, same time, same place. And happy Spring Day for tomorrow. And we've also really enjoyed all the wonderful nominations that we've received for our Women's Day campaign. All the women that inspired, bro, all the messages have been lovely to read. Please check out all the nominations on our LinkedIn page. Take care and goodbye. And until next time, remember, we're all in this together, even though we're apart. Thank you so much and goodbye.